The Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
Welcome, as it is a Tuesday, which means we'll be joined by John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel, and a lot to get to on the program. Texas A&M week, bye week in the rear view mirror, as opposed to rear view mirror in the bye week. Yes, there we go. All right. Why is the line what it is for Tennessee, Texas A&M? We'll discuss that with John, because he and I were both a little surprised why the line was roughly 3.5. Caleb will get your thoughts on that as well, because Caleb is our gambling expert. Is this year's Tennessee team boring? That was something that John and I discussed last night, and he is hearing that from a lot of different people. I disagree. I think it's actually a more exciting team and a more intriguing team, although not the same as what you expected from last year. Injuries, ever an excuse, and a new segment on the program, Football IQ, why some coaches can't make simple decisions. Josh Heupel talks about Eric Berry being in the College Football Hall of Fame, and he will be honored this weekend before the Texas A&M game. And is the improvement on defense the story of the Vols season so far? So a lot going on. Caleb, how are you, sir?
I'm doing amazing. How are you, Dave?
I'll take amazing all the time. Good morning to all those already on the message board. Go ahead and give us your thoughts now as we bring John Adams in of the Knoxville News Sentinel with, there we go, max headroom for a moment, but he got it fixed. John, how are you, sir? I'm loving the green look.
Caleb has T-shirt Tuesday. I now have extraterrestrial Tuesday. This is a space alien pullover that I got in southern Colorado at a UFO watchtower.
I was thinking you were going with tie-dyed Tuesday because it looks a little, Caleb, doesn't it look a little tie-dyed to you?
It does, but a UFO watch party in Colorado. John, what else were you doing around that time?
What? John does look like the type of people that I bumped into when I was in Massachusetts, where dispensaries are on every corner and marijuana is very legal. So there are a couple of shirts like that too, John. Were you ever a Grateful Dead guy?
No, I was not.
I could see that. All right, let's go ahead into Four Downs right now. Four Downs brought to you by our friend
bro.
Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. It's time for Four Downs, and we're going to discuss this betting line. Here we go.
Four downs. 4 questions. 4 answers. The Dave Hooker Show. Four downs. A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
Okay. Give us some background, Caleb, as to where this line was in the preseason, because you discussed this yesterday, where it is now. And I want to ask John Adams why it is where it is now. So what was the line in the offseason, sir?
So as a futures line, Tennessee was a double-digit favorite across the board, depending on the sportsbook you used. It went from about 10 to 14 points. Last Monday, before Texas A&M played on Saturday, Tennessee was favored by roughly 7 points. So it moved a little bit from the start of the season. Then yesterday, or after Saturday's games, the line has now moved to roughly a field goal or 4 points, depending on the sports book. So about 3.5 for Tennessee. So it's consistently moved to A&M from the start of the season to what happened last Saturday to now, from roughly 10 to 14 to now 3.5.
John, before we get into reasons why it may be where it is, what did you think coming into the week that it might be? I want to remind everybody to hit like and subscribe, have the notifications on. But does this line surprise you as is, John? And what did you think it might be before it came out on Sunday?
I thought it would be a pick'em game. The line, the preseason line, I didn't understand that either. I thought that was way high for A&M. Way high for Tennessee. I still think, to me, it's just a toss-up game. That's kind of what the odds makers are saying with a 3.5 point line. You take the home field advantage into account, and you would say this is a toss-up game.
No, well said. And Caleb, as our best betting representative on a regular basis, what does this line tell you about what Vegas is saying? Because to me, it is saying what John is, that it's a coin flip line, and it actually is leading me to believe that Vegas thinks A&M might win this game. But is that too strong? Your thoughts?
I think, yeah, I actually think it's not a pick 'em. I think they're saying that A&M is better because the line moves roughly 3 points for NFL Sunday games. But I think you need to add my guess is they add 2 more points for like an environment like Neyland Stadium. Like if a line moves 3 points for an NFL Sunday game, shouldn't it move 5 points for Neyland Stadium in that environment or something like that? And then you add in the fact that Tennessee is coming off a bye and A&M just played a tough game. I'm sure Vegas takes that into account. So we're talking another couple points. I think exterior factors, the bye and playing at home, you're talking about the line moving 7 points to me in Tennessee's direction. So I think they think all things equal on a neutral field, Texas A&M wins this game by 3 or 4 points.
John, your thoughts on that? I think Caleb is right on the money.
Oh, I agree. If you look at Texas A&M's depth chart, look at Tennessee's depth chart, Texas A&M has a better team. There are a lot of, and Caleb's pointed out the bye week while A&M was playing at College Station against Alabama. Playing Alabama has never been conducive to a great performance the following week. I can't cite any stats on that, but teams often don't fare as well. There's sometimes a hangover effect from playing against a very good and very physical team as Alabama is right now. What's interesting to me, though, is that people don't believe in Texas A&M. The preseason line that Caleb brought up, I mean, if you looked at the talent A&M had returning, I know it had a bad year last year. It shouldn't have been that big of underdog against Tennessee, even playing in Neyland Stadium. But people don't believe in Texas A&M. That's why it wasn't ranked previously going into the Alabama game. They just think A&M won't deliver when it counts, and it has a history of that. So I think that's a part of it in looking at this line. And I can't think of another team where there's such a widespread lack of confidence in than there is Texas A&M. And that's come about through results on the field. It didn't just happen. A&M has proven itself to be an underachiever. But when you start breaking down position by position, Texas A&M is a better team than Tennessee. It's got a more talented roster. It's also played a tougher schedule. If Texas A&M had played Tennessee's schedule, it would be unbeaten right now.
Let me ask you this. You say better team. Are you not taking into account coaching? Because you said better roster, but better team.
No, I'm talking about, I'm talking about just talent, players on the field. No, Jimbo as a coach is clearly in decline, and Josh Heupel is regarded as one of the best offensive coaches in college football. So Jimbo Fisher at one time was considered sort of an offensive guru. That might be overstating the case, but he had really good offenses. He's not anymore. Bobby Petrino has certainly helped, but still, this A&M team, I really thought A&M would beat Alabama. Clearly wrong about that. But the line favored Alabama, and I thought that line, too, was a testament to the lack of faith people have in A&M. Playing at home, I don't think there was great disparity in talent between Texas A&M and Alabama. Alabama's better coached.
No, I'll give you credit. I mean, the roster, if you want to talk about the roster and the actual players, A&M stacks up right there and is probably better than Tennessee. But as a team, I would take Tennessee, and I don't have a problem with them being favored. I actually might be in the minority here. I would have them as a 5 or 6 point favorite. But let's get into that with 4 Downs, brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Cooper, what do people need to do?
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
You can do that and turn the notifications on. What down, Coop?
Coop here. First down.
All right, home field advantage for Tennessee. It's turned into one of the toughest places to play again. How big of a factor is that? Caleb, let me start with you. What is that worth? I remind you that 4 Downs brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Over 40 years of experience. He's my realtor, should be yours right there in Tennessee, buying or selling real estate. Andy Mason, realestate.com. So, Caleb, what's home field advantage, particularly at Neyland, worth? You said you hinted at 5 earlier.
Yeah, I said it's 5. I said if you're going to give 3 for the NFL, you need to give 5 for a place like Neyland or the Swamp or anywhere like that.
John, I don't have a problem with that, but based off that, we're saying that Vegas thinks in a neutral site that A&M might even be favored by a half point or point.
Yeah, I agree with Caleb. It hasn't always been that way. The crowds at Neyland Stadium under Josh Heupel remind me of the crowds in Tennessee's 1998 national championship season. It has that kind of an impact on the game, and that's a tribute to what Heupel has done with the program. And we can go back and, before Heupel, I mean, there were some home games there at Neyland Stadium where I didn't think the crowd was much of a factor. Certainly not as much as you would see at Florida at times or Alabama or Auburn or LSU. But now put it up there, right up there with anybody. I think the swing, if you were playing this game at College Station, I would probably pick Texas A&M by 7 points.
Wow.
Play it at Neyland, I would pick Tennessee to win by 3, about what the line is.
And for those that don't know,
that's a big swing.
Yeah, John, for those that don't know, A&M, since it's a fairly new team in the conference, is an incredibly tough place to play. I'm sure most people know that, but just in case. All right, what down, Coop?
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
Okay, how much of this line takes into account A&M's history of choking? John, let me begin with you.
Oh, I think it's a huge factor, whatever you want to call it, choking, underachieving, whatever. And I think that's what the line last week took into account. Again, playing in front of a home crowd of 108,000 people there at Kyle Field against an Alabama team that really hasn't been overly impressive, with questions at quarterback and on offense. You would think the crowd could be a huge factor. And it forced 8 false start penalties on Alabama. 8. And Alabama still won the game. So, yeah, that's, to me, is it's just a lack of belief in Texas A&M.
Yep. Well, Caleb, they've proven that over the years, that a lack of belief is probably the right direction to go.
Yeah, I want to say it's having an impact, but I might disagree with you guys, because last week Alabama covered against Texas A&M. It was a Texas A&M it was Alabama minus 2.5, I think was the line, and they ended up winning by 6. And despite that, Vegas moved the line towards Texas A&M after this weekend. So because remember, like I said last week, Tennessee was favored by 7. Now they're favored by 3. So why did they move the line towards Texas A&M after A&M couldn't cover Vegas's own expectations last weekend?
I think the people in Vegas thought A&M would probably lose by 10 points, and they were impressed that they only lost by 6, maybe.
Yeah.
So even though they set the line at 2.5, they thought 10.
What down, Coop?
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
A&M playing a backup quarterback. How big of a factor is that in this line?
Well, sure, it's always a factor, but I thought Max Johnson's probably the second best backup in the SEC going into the Alabama game. He didn't get any help. He looked like Spencer Rattler behind South Carolina's offensive line, constantly had to throw off his back foot. If you give him time, I think he can be very effective. He's got a good touch on the deep ball. He can scramble. make plays. I think he's a really good backup quarterback. I think he would start for some teams in the SEC. However, the difference in him and Connor Wegman, I don't think it's as significant as it is between most first and second team quarterbacks in the SEC. And also the fact that as a true freshman in his first college start, he won in the swamp when Florida was number 6 in the country, and he won for LSU. I think it was like 39-36, something like that. So he's proven he can handle a hostile environment. So as backups go, he's pretty good.
Best backup in the SEC. You said he was the second best. Is it Nico or no? Who's the best backup in the SEC?
I would say Nussmeier at LSU.
Okay, fair. I would probably go Nico on that one. But so back
how do you know?
Well, I don't. For people I talk to, he's incredibly ready.
Okay.
But like Caleb's brought up, that may not matter if he goes out there and gets hurt on the third play. So fourth down, Coop.
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. Fourth down.
Here's what I think it is ultimately is the national media isn't sold on these Vols. They're completely different and a different offensive approach. John, let me start with you and get to Caleb. I just don't think the national media is sold on these Vols quite yet. And frankly, they probably shouldn't be. South Carolina's not a great football team. I thought Josh Heupel had his worst coaching performance in Gainesville since becoming a Vol. John, you want to go first and Caleb jump in on that? It is just I don't know that there's reason for the national media to be sold on the Vols, nor for Vegas to yet.
No, not at all. I mean, you go back to preseason when Tennessee, I think, was 10th and 12th in the 2 top 25 polls. So that was that told me they were pretty sold on the Vols because Tennessee did have some significant losses, namely quarterback Hendon Hooker. But if you've watched this team play, why would you be sold on it? Hasn't beaten a team with a winning record. The loss to Florida looks worse by the weekend. Florida just got hammered by Kentucky, and then Kentucky was dismantled by Georgia. So there's no real reason to say, man, I believe in Tennessee. It's 4-1 and it's getting ready to take off. That doesn't mean it can't take off and show significant improvement, but it's got to do something on the field before you win over national media top 25 voters.
Caleb, what do you got?
Yeah, I think what Vegas is doing is they're resetting what they thought of Tennessee before the Orange Bowl, which if you guys remember, Clemson was favored in that Orange Bowl. I think Clemson was favored by like a touchdown in that Orange Bowl too. And I think Vegas, like a lot of people, overreacted to Joe Milton's performance in the bowl game. Even though if you really watch the bowl game, Milton still missed on a lot of throws in that game. I think his play was really overrated when he won Orange Bowl MVP.
Well, but if he plays like that consistently, Tennessee, I mean, if that's the high water mark, that's an okay high water mark. I mean, I don't think he's played that differently since that Orange Bowl. He missed a lot. We only remember the times he hit, and Clemson's defense didn't get off the bus in that game. And so I think he's missed a lot of passes underneath that he would have missed in that game. But I mean, if that's the high water mark, Tennessee is competing for a college football playoff spot. I guess it depends on your expectations going in. John, if he plays that well, I think Tennessee's good. I just don't have expectations that he's going to play considerably better than that.
No, I agree with you. I'm one of those people that put a lot of stock in that Orange Bowl performance because it was against a top 10 team, and it was with a lot of pressure on him. Wasn't in a hostile environment, but it was on a neutral site. So there's a lot of pressure on him to perform well, and he did that. He was the offensive MVP for a reason. He wasn't perfect, certainly, but he didn't make any turnovers. Compare that to the Joe Milton we saw against Florida or even against Austin Peay. And if he had played at that Clemson level, Tennessee, I think, would be 5-0 right now and maybe a 7-point favorite over the Aggies.
All right. John, let me get you to move over to your left a little bit. You're fading out of or maybe you're right. There you go. He's all centered now. We got him. And it's time for What the H? Because John brought this up yesterday. This is why we talk every single Monday before the show, because he brought this up he has an incredible group of emailers. He has an email chain, and they are able to give him some feedback as to this Tennessee football team. And he brought something out of left field that I thought, man, that couldn't be better than what the H, because we're going to do that right now. It's brought to you by Zen Sports.
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
All right, so the question was brought up in John's circle, and I want to get your thoughts as well. Is this Tennessee team boring? And I was taken aback by John even bringing that up. I don't think it's boring, and I'll tell you why. First, John, if you can share the sentiment from the people you hear from that this is a boring Tennessee football team.
Well, let's put this in perspective. It wasn't as though I got 1,000 emails on this, but a couple of people brought it up, and I can understand that. It's all relative. Look what Tennessee was the first 2 years under Josh Heupel. Tennessee's averaging 10 points per game fewer than it did last season. It's ranked. It was number 1 in yards per game. It's like 21st now in yards per game. Tennessee was a big play machine last season. Now those big plays are fewer and far between. I thought it was, if you were just a fan of college football and Tennessee was playing on television last season, that would be one of the games I think a lot of people would want to watch just because of Tennessee's robust offense. I mean, it scored 66 on Missouri after kind of a slow start. But you don't see that now. The passing game has not delivered, and I think that's the reason for it. So I'm not saying it's Jeremy Pruitt boring. I'm just saying, I mean, and I'm speaking for these people who email me. I think they're saying compared to last year, this team just isn't as exciting as it was.
All right, let me ask you, Caleb, is this Tennessee team boring? And on the message board as well, I'm going to give you my retort. I think it's actually more intriguing than last year. But Caleb, let me begin with you.
All right, a good comparison for me, because you said Jeffrey Pruitt boring, and yeah, it's not that level. Last year, because people say Josh Heupel's this era Steve Spurrier. Last year, Josh Heupel was Steve Spurrier at Florida. This year's Tennessee team is Josh Heupel with Steve Spurrier at South Carolina.
Ooh,
and
it's actually pretty good, John. What do you think of that?
I think it's excellent because if you remember Steve Spurrier's South Carolina teams, it wasn't fun and gun offense. It was running the ball. How many times did what was his name? Marcus Lattimore, the running back there. Didn't he carry over 40 times in a game? Spurrier proved that he by then he'd put his offensive ego behind him, and he was doing everything he could to win games. And the best way to win games at South Carolina wasn't throwing it 45 times a game. It was running the ball and playing pretty good defense. That's a great comparison on Caleb's part.
Yeah, it's pretty. I'm having trouble beating that one. So to the message board, Papa J saying boring against last year. Rocky Top Tom has some strong feelings on Joe Milton. People could characterize it as boring. I'm just incredibly PO'd to see our impotent offense being led by Joe Milton, who the coaches don't trust to run this thing the way it should be. Okay, to me, now maybe this is reporter Dave coming out as opposed to fan of college football Dave. I think it's actually more intriguing because this team is having to manufacture some yards in a different fashion. This team is better defensively, and as John can tell you, I like me some good defensive football. I think they're exciting up front defensively. They've got some great storylines. Now, it may have led to a loss, but the Cooper Mays storyline being out, Keenan Pillion will get to injuries and all of that they've dealt with. I actually think there's more intriguing storylines, John, but am I talking more from the journalism perspective than a fan perspective? Is that what I'm doing here?
I think you can answer that question yourself, Dave. It's not even close. Yeah, I don't think most fans care about intriguing storylines. They want to see the ball in the end zone. They want to see Steve Spurrier at Florida. They don't want to see Steve Spurrier at South Carolina.
Yeah. Caleb, am I looking at it through with my notepad in my back pocket? Is that the problem?
I'm actually going to break from John and semi-agree with you, Dave, but I think you're looking at it wrong. I think the storyline, the biggest storyline with
So
this is...
you think we're both wrong, Caleb?
Yes, I'm the only right one here, guys. Don't you know? No, okay, I'm
He's
kidding.
such a contrarian.
What I was going to say was what I think this season is doing is I think it's intriguing largely because we always had this question of what's going to happen when Josh Heupel's offense is figured out. And I'm not saying his offense has been figured out, but he's showing this year more than he's ever showed any time as an offensive coordinator or a head coach. If he doesn't have the passing game, he can rely heavily on the run and beat you that way. And I think that's going to force defensive coordinators to reset again this offseason to say, oh, Josh Heupel can beat us in a lot of ways, not just with his wide splits and throwing it 80 yards down the field for touchdowns. And I think that's a big deal long-term for Josh Heupel.
I agree. Rocky Top Tom says that's a solid point, Dave. That characterization is intriguing because it's fly by the britches, shoestring style interesting. And then David has to say storylines are only good when you're winning. We can pretend like we care about something else besides winning. Well, and at the end of the day, the ultimate storyline is Joe Milton good enough to have this offense performing at an elite level? And I still don't think we know that heading into the middle of October. John, I think that is in and of itself an intriguing storyline.
Yeah, but you also have to say, yeah, Tennessee's winning a different way, but who is it actually beating? It's just beating a bunch of bad teams. So I don't, that doesn't mean anything. If you beat Alabama running the ball, that means something. If you beat Texas A&M running the ball, that means something because Texas A&M teams haven't been running the ball well on Texas A&M. They pretty much stonewall running games. So, yeah, that would be significant. But right now, yeah, Tennessee's winning in a different way, but it's winning against a bunch of nobodies.
Okay, so to both of you guys, Caleb, start with you. If Tennessee beats Alabama, okay, let's not make the jump to Georgia, but they beat Alabama in this boring fashion, am I more right that the storylines are intriguing because they led to a win in Tuscaloosa without the high-flying Jalen Hyatt catching 5 million touchdown passes?
Yeah, you're more right. Would Tennessee fans rather score 65 points a game or beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa? Like, obviously, the latter. And so, and also, I do want to say, and I brought this up yesterday. I brought up what John said yesterday, which is Tennessee hasn't played anybody. But statistically, I lamented South Carolina's rush defense yesterday. Did a little more digging overnight. The only reason South Carolina's rush defense is ranked so bad now is because they played Tennessee. They actually were giving up fewer than 4 yards a carry before they played Tennessee 2 weeks ago. And Tennessee gashed them so badly. That's why they're now ranked so low. So we kind of have to sit there and say, well, maybe Tennessee's run game against South Carolina was legitimate. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But South Carolina was giving up. We thought Tennessee was going to have to beat South Carolina through the air and expose that weak secondary and we thought they had a decent run defense, and Tennessee gashed them on the ground.
Yeah, and John, I do believe that this Tennessee team can win at a high level like that. Maybe that's where you and I are a little bit different, perhaps.
Well, I'm just not sure. But Caleb's right about South Carolina's defense. It stopped Georgia's running game, which isn't particularly efficient. It stops Georgia's run offense. It didn't stop Tennessee's. So, yeah, that's not the weakest point of South Carolina's team, which has several notable weaknesses. So, yeah, you could make that case. Tennessee, right now, and this is significant, I wrote this as a South Carolina game, is that Tennessee is running the ball better than Alabama and Georgia. And how many times have you seen that? And so, despite the weakness of schedule, I think that stat is significant when you do a little comparative shopping. However, to do that against Texas A&M's defense, if it runs the ball on Texas A&M, if it gets 170 yards rushing on Texas A&M, that would be a really significant and really would bode well for the rest of the season.
Now, Four Downs brought to you today by What the H brought to you today by our friends at Zen Sports. Zen Sports, the new sports book in Tennessee, revolutionizing the way you earn sports betting rewards. That means no more deposit bonuses that turn into deposit nightmares. On Zen Sports, what you see is what you get. With their cash rewards program, you get a lot of cash for a welcome bonus. Earn an unlimited 5% cash back on your betting volume for your first 15 days when you sign up with the code HOOKED. That's HOOKED, HOOKED. Unlimited 5% cash back. Keep betting, keep earning with up 3% cash back on your betting volume every month after that. And refer friends to earn a percentage of their betting volume as cash rewards too. Zen Sports is bringing the cash back to Tennessee. So if you bet big on sports, you want to be betting on Zen Sports. Zen Sports betting just got better. Call 1-800-889-9789 for gambling problems. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 and over and in Tennessee to bet. So basically, if Tennessee wins this way, that in Tuscaloosa, they're exciting. Right now, they're not very exciting, but I think there's a possibility of that. So here we go. Coming up with John Adams. John, by the way, how can we follow your work, sir?
I'm at the knoxnews.com on our website. You also can catch me on SEC Unfiltered with Blake Topmeyer, our weekly SEC podcast, and in the Knoxville News Sentinel.
Okay. Coming up, I think John's going to call me really dumb. I think that's what's going to happen, and it wouldn't be the first time. In 90 seconds, are injuries ever an excuse? I say yay. Stay tuned. 90 seconds off the Hook Sports.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Have you seen the latest TriStar Hats Co. product?
TriStar Hats Co.? What's that?
You know, those really cool hats, shirts, tumblers, and even license plates with 3 stars like the official Tennessee flag and stripes like the American flag. Pretty patriotic if you ask me.
Ah, gotcha. Seen those. Those are cool. Where can I get them?
Simple. TriStarHatsCo.com. And if you order now, there's 10% on any order $50 or more. Plus, use the promo code HOOKED.
With the promo code HOOKED, you get 10% off. That's hooked.
And don't forget free shipping with any order over $50. Stock up at TriStarHatsCo.com. That's TriStarHatsCo.com. There are plenty of wannabes out there, so make sure you go to TriStarHatsCo.com for the best quality and customer service.
Will do, and I'll be sure to use the promo code HOOKED. That's hooked when I do, to save an additional 10% off. TriStarHatsCo.com.
TriStar Hats Co. is a trademark of TriStar Hats Co. LLC. Any use without express written consent is prohibited.
You're listening to The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
The internet is full of pictures of each and every one of you.
Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free.
Is there nothing you people can't do?
Also available on OffTheHookSports.com.
Every once in a while, I will bring something up with John Adams, and I'll get oh, come on, Dave. And I got one of those last night. Today's tough question will involve you. Go ahead and call me the excuse maker, but here we go. Today's tough question brought to you by Campbell Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
All right, guys, are injuries ever an excuse? Let me just start with that and ask John Adams. Are injuries ever an excuse for a football team not living up to expectations?
Sure, they're an excuse sometimes, but you frame that question within the context of Tennessee's injuries.
I do want to get to that.
Okay.
But for instance, Aaron Rodgers getting hurt with the Jets in the fourth.
Yeah, that's an excuse.
Yeah, then basically you're not going to achieve what you wanted to. So, Caleb, what are your thoughts on how often injuries can actually be a real reason, I guess I should say, and not an excuse? And then I want to get specifically to Tennessee.
Yeah, it's a case-by-case basis, but they can definitely be an excuse. I would say you guys both covered the 2002 Tennessee team. I think Philip Fulmer had an excuse that year because I think it was just a barrage. It was like 20 years of injuries rolled into one season in 2002. And so they are.
Is it a fair reason for Tennessee having dropped a game and not playing at their best at various times? Austin Peay comes to mind. John, is that a fair reason or is that just an excuse?
I think it's more of an excuse. It's also a reason. Cooper Mays being out starting center, that affected Tennessee's offense, no doubt about that. But if it had lost to Austin Peay, you couldn't blame it on the absence of center Cooper Mays. And I don't blame the loss to Florida on the absence of Cooper Mays because every team incurs injuries. It's just part of football at the NFL level, at the SEC level, wherever. And this is a very physical league. When you lose a starting quarterback, that's when you're worried about your season being sabotaged by injuries. But there's sometimes, and Caleb brought up an example of the 02 team. I remember Tennessee's 04 team when its top two quarterbacks were injured, and it ended up playing in the SEC championship game with a third-string quarterback, Rick Clausen. So you would say, oh, my gosh, there's no way Tennessee can win after losing two quarterbacks, and it still managed to do so. So, yeah, injuries can be an excuse, but for Tennessee, these injuries haven't been significant enough. Losing Keenan Pili, a linebacker, yeah, he was their best player at that position, and that hurts some. And losing Brew McCoy, that hurts the receiving core. But you can't say, oh, my gosh, the season's over. You can't achieve your goals without those guys. I don't believe that. If that's the case, then your roster wasn't well fortified enough to begin with.
Okay, the second part of what you said is what I wanted to address. And Caleb, let me get to you. The roster is not fortified to where it should be. Now, that's a different argument, okay? But I think injuries with this team are an excuse for why they have one loss, because I think they win at Florida with Cooper Mays. I think Keenan Pili, even though they played fine without him, handled a lot of the defensive costs. I think Brew McCoy is a big deal because there is no way in this world that Nimrod, Webb, or Ramel Keaton are going to dictate coverage like a true number one receiver does. So it's not going to open things up on the other side. So if Tennessee were to lose 3 or 4 games this season, I think you have seen enough, Caleb, that you could point back to and you could say, always remember that 2023 season, they did have that bad run of injuries. I'm not saying it's time to go 6-6, but Caleb, I think they're to the point where it has to be factored in when we tell the story of this season moving forward.
The one area where I wouldn't factor it in, though, is I do put a lot of blame on Josh Heupel for this point not having had a backup center ready to go. And I think this is year 3, and he's put all his eggs in Addison Nichols being ready to go, and he clearly wasn't. So he's forced to Volley Lane. And I've been on this about Josh Heupel for a while. Josh Heupel, the play caller, no issues. Josh Heupel, the talent evaluator, it's like everybody's asking about Bill Belichick right now with New England and him struggling. I'm like, I don't think Bill Belichick, the coach, is the problem. Bill Belichick, the GM, is the problem. He's not making good personnel moves. And I think that is where the Cooper Mays injury is not an excuse. Because the reason it became a factor was Josh Heupel has not done what he needs to do to make sure there was a backup ready to go. The Brew McCoy injury, yes, he's a rare talent. I don't think that's an excuse either, though, because you have 3 other 4-star wideouts who you recruited. So if you can't find a replacement for Brew McCoy by this point, again, that's a talent evaluation issue. And that needs to be called out.
John, I think that the answer to my question will come pretty quickly. If they have the ability to turn in another Brew McCoy, as they did last year when Cedric Tillman got hurt, if Kalen Webb or Chaz Nimrod are one of those guys, then Tennessee's fine. I don't have any premonition that they'll be those type of guys. And so I guess largely my assertion, it remains to be seen, but I don't think they have another guy that's going to be able to move defensive secondaries around.
Well, again, that speaks to Caleb's point. You've got to think in terms of what happens if this happens. What happens if we lose this guy? What do we do then? It's not. Cooper Mays is. You could say is an All SEC center. We say that on this show repeatedly. Brew McCoy is not an All SEC wide receiver. Keenan Pili is not an All SEC linebacker. I can cite other teams that have had more significant losses. Georgia, for example, lost a really key running back in Branson Robinson for the year. I think he would have been their leading rusher. McConkey has hardly played this season because of injury. He's their best wide receiver, an All-SEC caliber receiver. And you can go on, you can look at any team. South Carolina, for all its problems, some of those were directly related to injuries in the offensive line. So I just don't think at this point Tennessee's injuries are that huge a contributor to what this team is. I don't think if we disagree on this. I think if Cooper Mays played against Florida, Tennessee would have still lost that game. Tennessee's defense was a problem in that game. And if you remember, quarterback Graham Mertz for Florida was playing with a hurt hand in the second half, and that affected, I think, the play calling for Florida, which was picking apart Tennessee's secondary in the passing game before that.
So what do you specifically on that, Caleb, what do you think if Cooper Mays plays? Does Tennessee beat Florida? Remind you that portions of the program brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Enjoy life better when you see better. Local vision service for LASIK, cataract surgery, and regular eye examination. ccteyes.com. ccteyes.com. I've had LASIK, no contacts, no glasses. Absolutely love it. So let me backtrack a little bit because I thought John and I agreed on that, but we don't. Do you think Tennessee beats Florida with a healthy Cooper Mays from the get?
Yeah, I break with John on that. I'm with you, Dave, because I think that one of the reasons Tennessee's defense, now, to be fair, Tennessee's defensive line, and I've said this for a while, the edge rushers didn't get off the bus that day either. I mean, Tyler Barron and Roman Harrison should have taken a long shower after that Florida game because they didn't bother to show up for that game. But I will say that part of the problem was after Florida scored that first touchdown, Tennessee had a 5-play drive, a 2-play drive, a three and out. And the reason was they couldn't run the ball at all. They averaged fewer than 4 yards a carry in that game. Jalen Wright himself was the best runner, and he averaged 3.5 yards a carry, I think. And I think this Tennessee defense plays off the offense getting a lead. And the longer you put them on the field, which the offense couldn't stay on the field in the first half, nor could they build a lead, the more things are going to unravel for that defense.
John, going back to your roster comment, that there should be somebody behind them to just immediately step in. And when you saw Alabama at its best, it was like, oh, the Bryce Young guy is going to be great. He's probably going to win a Heisman. I mean, there was just no doubt for the longest period of time that they were going to plug and play. So we are in year 3, and there is a transfer portal. So should Tennessee fans be concerned at all about the player development as of late, but that the roster is not at an elite level if it's not what you suggested earlier?
Well, I think Tennessee has to be more aggressive and do a better job evaluating in the transfer portal. Looking ahead to the 2024 season, particularly addressing issues in the offensive line. We talked about this before, where there are a lot of seniors on this offensive line, including some as backups, that Tennessee has got to hit the portal really hard this offseason. And perhaps it will. You can't count on freshmen coming in and helping you greatly in that area. So, yeah, I think we expect teams to be good right away now, and Josh Heupel has done that. I still think what he did, I mean, he developed. There's been player development. I'm not necessarily knocking his player development. I think he took players that weren't doing anything under Jeremy Pruitt and won significantly. And they had great seasons. You look at those wide receivers in his offense last year. So yeah, I think, but I still think the roster, there's more work to be done when you talk about, even though Tennessee made the top 10 last year, when you talk about competing for that playoff berth, there's still work to be done with the roster.
Travis says most transfers are only transfers because they don't play enough. You mentioned evaluating transfers, good for filling an immediate need. I don't know about you, John, but this channel has admitted, Caleb and I both admitted, we're probably a little too high on Dante Thornton. When you go back and look, he only had like 230 yards receiving, only got on the field because of an injury. To say that he's going to step in and be a Brew McCoy, who I think is going to be a special NFL talent one day, that's a little strong with Dante. I think we all got a little strong with Dante.
Well, I think there was a good reason for that. It was because the way coaches were talking about him in the offseason, they made him out to be the next Randy Moss. He's a freak. He's 6'5", 220, runs like the wind. You know, I've been thinking, will anybody even be able to tackle or catch him once he gets the ball? He's not quite that. I think his big year at Oregon was catching 24 passes. So maybe we should have looked at those stats a little harder. But you do get caught up, even though we know this is what coaches can do at times. We do get caught up in what they say. And when Joey Halsley is just so lavish in his praise of Dante Thornton, you think, man, how's Squirrel White going to keep him off the field?
I was actually thinking that at one point.
Well, I mean, I understand why. And see, I'm a real proponent, and I know this transfer portal thing it's only been really significant in the last few years, but I'm really a big proponent of finding players at a lower level of play from the SEC who are really productive. I'd rather get an all-conference guy from the Mountain West than a guy who was just mediocre starting for Florida.
There we go. And we have Rocky Top Tom says, Thornton's effort stinks. He didn't say stinks. If you're on our YouTube channel, you'd see what he actually said because it's on the screen. Also, I agree with that, by the way. Michael Cooper says, when is Keenan coming back? That's a long-term injury. He doesn't have any eligibility left, so I think the goal is to get him in a game so that he can have some tape to show NFL teams more than he has now. But that tricep injury, don't expect him to be a major player until late in the year, maybe even the bowl game is what I'm told. So here we go. A new segment, John. Caleb has unveiled this. It's time for a little football IQ where we talk about coaches being, is it either this?
Yeah, jackass.
We didn't hear that.
You suck. Yeah, jackass.
Or is it just this?
That's crazy.
All right. So
you suck. Yeah, jackass.
That means you're just incredibly dumb. This means
that's crazy.
You're just kind of dumb. So do we want to go ahead and get Mario Cristobal out of the way?
Well, the game is okay because John, you've heard many times I'm sure of your life, and Dave has to, when coaches make a decision that everybody with eyes, like you know, my wife can watch me like, why did they do that? And the coach will be like, well, you just don't have football IQ. And that's and so what you guys have to do for me, I'm going to play the casual fan here. I need to understand the football IQ of coaches. So y'all have to defend the decision from a football IQ perspective because I don't have football IQ. I just have basic probabilities and an understanding of it.
Right. You just have basic cognitive ability. All right. So here we go. All right. Do we want to get a Cristobal out of the way? Because that's
let's just get Cristobal out of the way because that's so obvious.
No, that's worse than that. That's
you suck. Yeah, jackass.
What did you think about the handing the ball off, John?
When he could have taken a knee.
When he could have taken a knee.
I don't try and figure out what's going on in coaches' minds on game day. You got to keep in mind that these guys, football is all about preparation. And you get into, but when you get into the game, it's about thinking on your feet. And I think sometimes people go, well, I have no idea why he thought that was a good idea. I flash back to I think it was the Eagles and New York Giants many years ago when the Giants had just to run one play and kill the clock. Joe Pisarcik was the quarterback, take a knee, but they handed the ball off, fumbled it. The Eagles picked it up and ran for a touchdown. I mean, you're like, how hard is it to think about that? You talk if that's a football IQ decision, then football IQ is a disease, and it needs medication and it needs treatment and therapy.
Talk about
preparation. Football IQ is the girl math. Now, y'all seen girl math on Twitter? That's what football IQ is.
No, that was preparation. Ouch! If we're talking about preparation, because that was bad.
You suck, yeah, jackass.
Okay,
oh, y'all can't even use. Y'all can't give me a BS coach reason to try to defend it. It's that bad. You can't make up something. That's the game. Y'all have the football IQ right now.
Here's the only BS excuse I can come up with. My name's Mario Cristobal. I did not think that we would ever have the lead, so I have not practiced the victory formation. That's all.
What's one of the most famous plays in Tennessee football history is a product of Houston Nutt's football IQ.
Yes.
When Clint Sterner, two things amazingly stupid happened on that play. Tennessee has got to give an all-out rush, push the line back, make something happen, force a turnover. So why would you call a play that allows your quarterback to turn his back on that line of scrimmage? There's just no good explanation for that. But the other factor is that Clint Sterner, with a really high football IQ, decided to use the football as a prop before he hit the ground. Oh, I'll brace my fall with the football. Oops, it's gone. So there are just so many examples of this. Some of them aren't as flagrant. The most amazing one to me was many years ago when Jerry Stovall, one of the worst coaches ever to grace an SEC sideline, was running the LSU show. They against Auburn, there was a slight wind, maybe 12 miles an hour. It was significant enough where you would choose to take a side of the field. But LSU's captains went out for the coin toss. They chose to will kick off was their decision.
I've covered a game. I've done play-by-play for a game, and Warren Sapp did that once. Where I've done play-by-play where the guy said, "We'll kick." No, I know. You defer. You don't kick.
Okay, I understand that. That's a player doing that. Okay, you expect a little more from the coach. Jimmy Himes was covering that LSU team with me, and Jimmy asked Jerry Stovall afterward. He said, "Well, you have to either choose to kick off or receive."
He still didn't get it.
You can't choose to defend a goal. And so the next Monday, Jimmy goes out to the practice field with a rule book.
Oh, no.
And shows Jerry, he said, well, right here in the rules, it says you have an option of defending the goal. I mean, seriously, 8-year-olds know this.
Yes.
Anybody who's watched a football game knows you can defend the goal, but Jerry didn't. And then so when Jimmy put the rule book in front of him, Jerry said, "Oh, well, I know that." Yeah. Oh, okay.
I don't think you did.
One of the players told the defensive coordinator who was chewing him out on the sidelines. He said, "Why did you say kick off? We wanted to defend the goal." He said, "Coach Stovall told me you need to say we want to kick off."
Oh
my gosh!
What else you got, Caleb?
I'll give the Mario Cristobal football IQ defense, which is that the college football playoff takes into account style points, and he needed another first down for style points if he was going to get to the college.
Oh, come on! What else you got, Caleb?
All right, so let's go this one. This is my favorite one of the weekend. I don't know if you guys saw this. Arkansas, at the end of the first half, they're going to get the ball back with the chance to maybe get a last-second field goal. But out of a timeout on a punt, they have 12 men on the field. After a timeout, which gives Ole Miss a first down.
I will say that's not Horrible, horrible. I will just go with the Tracy Morgan.
That's crazy.
How bad is that, John? But you
That's,
really shouldn't.
That's crazy, but I'll bring up another Tennessee example on that. In the loss to LSU in 2010, when Derek Dooley was heading up the UT Brain Trust, Tennessee had on the game-deciding play not 12 men on the field, but 13 on the field. And somebody over there was counting players and just kind of got lost along the way.
Yeah, that
but John, that was a panic move, not out of a timeout, and it's also because they were shocked that Les Miles would be stupid enough to sub so late with the clock running. I think they were dumbfounded by Les Miles' dumbness.
Well, I mean, then that's bad scouting because you know how dumb Les Miles is.
That was not a chess club meeting. What else you got, Caleb?
You know, Caleb just hit on something. This football IQ thing. You want to talk about coaching IQ? Here's the best example of it. Les Miles won a national championship at LSU. Ed Orgeron won a national championship at LSU. So how smart do you have to be to outwit the other guys in football?
Yeah.
Well, the LSU job does have its advantages. A lot of local talent. I don't know that you can do that just at South Carolina.
Well, I
agree.
Maybe not, but I mean, how do you do it even at LSU? Ed Orgeron and Les Miles. I mean, Les Miles didn't watch the clock. He didn't know what down it was. I mean, he was Joe Biden out there.
All right, what else you got, Caleb?
All right, so we got number 4, and you guys, this is my hot take. Jed Fish at Arizona. He made 2 major blunders. There was a 4th and goal from the 4 in the game, and there was a 21-yard field goal. And he took a timeout because to avoid a delay of game, because he didn't want a 26-yard field goal. He wanted to have that 21-yard field goal, which could prove crucial. He also, I think, which was the one I gave him knocks for, because a lot of these were bad timeout usage, was not going for 2 after scoring a touchdown in overtime and instead sending it to another overtime. When you're a 21-point underdog and you're on the road, you always go for 2 for the win. You never play for another overtime. The probabilities are basic at that point. You're better off trying to go for 2.
Oh, I agree with that. I agree with you. I was watching the game and I thought when they scored, you got to go for 2 there, because in the next segment of overtime, you'll be required to go for 2 anyway. Here's your chance to win the game against a more talented team. My gosh, what if you've got to lose? As a coach, you're always worried about, losses and how that will affect you. If you lose to Southern Cal in Arizona, is anybody gonna put you on the hot seat for that? No, it was really that wasn't crazy. That was really stupid.
Yeah, I agree with that, which gives it a big
You suck.
Portions of the program brought to you by Harold Group Security Solutions, leadership experience, specialization, addressing problems through unique mission-specific mitigation techniques. They are highly trained individuals that make your children safer. Working with private schools now, we're trying to extend that to public schools. So go to your school administrator and say, hey, you need to check out Harold Group Security Solutions, haroldgrp.com. Give me another, Caleb.
All right, we got 2 more. So this one, Washington State, when they were trailing UCLA 25-17, was driving. Cameron Ward scrambled, brought up a 4th and 1. Again, they're driving. They got 2 timeouts. They let the play clock run down from just over 2 minutes to 1:13, and then they use a timeout. After letting the play clock run down 38 seconds, when you know you're short on time. So I don't like burning timeouts to talk about 4th down plays anyway. I think that's really stupid. If you can save those to try to get the ball back, I think why would you? That's already next level dumb. But then it's another layer of dumb when you run the play clock down 38 seconds and use the timeout. So yeah.
I will go ahead and give that a.
You suck. You jackass.
All right, John,
what's your football IQ for that?
Well, but here's the thing, Caleb. How many times have you watched coaches standing there while seconds tick off the clock? You're just, I mean, if you're a fan, you're screaming at the TV, call timeout. And then finally they do after 20 seconds have run off the clock. Why didn't you? I mean, and you talk about a 4th down play. these are things we talk about preparation. You have that. It's just like you have that magical 2-point conversion play that Brian Kelly used last year against Alabama to win for LSU. This magical play. Well, you also have, you go into a game, here's what we're going to do on 4th and 1 against that defense. Yep. But you don't run down the clock and then call timeout.
Perhaps they're trying out the Big Orange Crunch, which, by the way, you can get 10% off. Use the promo code HOOKED. It's got the Delta 9 in it and the THC in it. You shouldn't do it before games necessarily, but the Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards to ensure you only receive the best in CBD and Delta products. Hemp House chat with 2ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED to get 10% off. How about that? The Big Orange Crunch is there, developed by Off the Hook Sports and the Hemp House. All right, Caleb, last one. Hooked on the hemp is what Papa J says. Not yet, but who knows?
It's our always creatively thinking. I lost last year on purpose because it could help me recruit to sell playing time to players. Yes, that's what Jimbo Fisher said last year during a losing streak, that it's a good thing because it'll help them sell playing time on the recruiting trail. Jimbo Fisher had a couple of ones. The punt on 4th and 1 from the 45-yard line at Alabama. 4th and 1 from the 45. The punt went into the end zone and netted a touchback. But don't worry, he was able to push that one aside because he outstupided that one with trailing 26-17. 4th and goal from the 2. He decides to run the play clock down and take a timeout to kick a field goal. And his reasoning was, we already had a kick blocked, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to get blocked this time.
Yeah. And Travis on the message board saying anything better than hookers and hemp. So this ties directly into Tennessee this year. Be sure to hit that, or this week, hit that like and subscribe. Jimbo Fisher, scale of 1 to 10, and Josh Heupel on the scale of smart coaches. Currently, where they are, where would you have them?
Is this for me or John?
Let's go, John. John?
Okay. Josh Heupel, probably right now, 8 or 9. Jimbo Fisher, probably a 3 or 4. I think his football IQ has declined precipitously since he was given that 10-year, $75 million contract that has since been extended and increased. He just doesn't remind me of the same guy that coached at Florida State. Offensively, I don't know. I just, and that play call, the one that struck me. I mean, I know Caleb trumped that with a later call, but that to me was the game. 4th and 1 on the 45, late in the third quarter. You've got 108,000 people screaming on your behalf. You want to get them into the game, maybe. You just gotta go for it there. What kind of message did that send to the team?
Yeah, agreed. John, great stuff. How do we follow your work, sir?
Knoxville News Sentinel or knoxnews.com, and check out our SEC podcast with Blake Topmeyer, SEC Unfiltered.
Thank you, John. Kept you a little long as we had some good stuff to get to. I appreciate the time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel. Coming up, why Tennessee's newest honoree to go in the College Football Hall of Fame is a guy that they should just make a whole nother level for when it comes to the College Football Hall of Fame. Like have an elite level and then the guys that get in level. I want to get to that because he's a very special former Vol, a BFL that I know is beloved and should be. Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry. How about the Fire Opals, splashing some orange, a Tennessee tradition? RickTerryJewelry.com, RickTerryJewelry.com. Support our sponsors right down there. So we're going to talk about one of Tennessee's most beloved balls of all time. And go ahead and if you want to, go ahead and throw some balls in there that are your most beloved all times, and we'll get your thoughts. 2 minutes off the Hook Sports.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Hi, I'm Rick Terry, and we at Rick Terry Jewelry Designs pride ourselves in the highest quality craftsmanship from a family-owned business here in Knoxville for over 35 years. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we also take pride in being an affordable option for all your game day accessories, especially those fire opals. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we want to be your jeweler every day and especially on game day. Go Vols!
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
These mountains hold and defend a spirit far better than moonshine. A drink that holds flavor, that becomes necessity. A hard cider made and relished by folk who are as hearty as they are legend. A refreshment that can only be found in one place. With a taste that makes you say, give me 3 bottles of the good stuff. Tennessee Cider Company, where necessity can be found.
A college football tradition like no other.
Yes, sirree, boys and girls.
Or a guy that just won't leave.
Wow, that is sad.
The Dave Hooker Show, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Back to Dave Hooker.
Who is your most beloved Vol? We want to hear that on the message board. Eric Berry will be honored for his induction into the College Football Hall of Fame. I've said this before. When guys go onto the NFL, I tend to root for people over jerseys. I'm a Cowboys fan, but man, if Eric Berry was lined up on the other side, playing for the Chiefs, which obviously he's not, I would have trouble not rooting for Eric Berry because I think he's one of the most standout individuals, both as a person and as a player, that Tennessee has ever had. I think you're talking about one of the elite defensive players, not just defensive backs, because they would roll him up at the Chiefs to play a little linebacker as well. I think you're talking about one of the elite defensive players. I'm talking 8 to 10 in the history of the game. I think he would have been that good had it not been for dealing with cancer, for the ACL injury, the Achilles injury. It just seemed like when he left Tennessee, and he was hurt at Tennessee as well, Caleb, that the cards were not in his favor. But all for honoring Eric Berry. I'm going to tell you why I think it's important as well, Caleb. But your thoughts on Eric Berry as he goes in the College Football Hall of Fame and will be honored this weekend.
You can't say enough about Eric Berry. The regard I have for him. I think that he was a freshman and acted like, I remember that was the one year I did cover practices some, and he acted like he was a senior leader. And you were covering practices too during that time. And if you didn't know the year, you would have thought he was a senior watching him that year, right? You would have thought this was a 3-time All-American senior who had already established himself. And he was such a veteran and so smart at such a young age. And I remember and you talk about him, you could talk more about him, being kind of the face of the program at a difficult time during the Fulmers last year, and really holding and really consistently maintaining a level head. I think one thing that stood out was he had developed such respect among his peers across the college football world that when Lane Kiffin took over, one of Lane Kiffin's first things was he was very big on, I don't care what you've done. You're not a starter, period. And then he said, except for Eric. He literally basically said Eric Berry's the one player on this team who, we're not even going to question that he's proven himself and he's got a job, and he doesn't have to go back and win his job when everybody else did.
He was, and he also said that he needed to go on to the NFL after that season was over. He had a year of eligibility left. So G. Smith throws in there Travis Henry, Al Wilson, Cordero Patterson, Derek Barnett, Josh Dobbs, Alvin Kamara, Jalen Hurd, Eric Berry, Jawan Jennings. So there's a lot of them in there. Here's the thing that about Eric Berry that was pretty stunning is they didn't really have a go-to quarterback to get your standard quote of how is this team dealing with injury X or how is this team dealing with a win loss over the weekend. And he was that guy, and things weren't going great. And Eric Berry was always there. So I say this and I mean it, not just a Hall of Fame player, but a Hall of Fame person. I think he was that fantastic. And when you throw in the fact that his brothers played there and his dad had played at Tennessee, I think if you were to pick one VFL in our generation, Caleb, I think Eric Berry is right. He's number one for me easily. And really, there's not a close second. That's just in my time of covering Tennessee.
You have him over Al Wilson as a player or just as a person?
Well, the all the above. I got to know him better because I covered him longer. So it's not a slight to Al Wilson. It's not a slight to Reggie White. It's not a slight to Doug Atkins. It's just how I feel through my personal experience of working with him.
So my favorite was always still, and I understand your point about Eric Berry, but it always stuck out to me that John Henderson chose to come back for his senior year when he had won the Outland Trophy. And by the way, we're talking a defensive tackle. We're not talking a quarterback like Peyton Manning, who also grew up in a wealthy family. We're talking a defensive tackle who, I don't know John Henderson's backstory, but my guess is going to the NFL was going to be the thing that gave his family generational wealth that they had never had before. Not saying they were poor or anything like that, but if you're the first in your family to go to the NFL, you're naturally going to bring in a lot more money than anybody else in the family has typically. And he was a defensive tackle putting up great risk to come back for his senior year for Tennessee in 2001 when he was an Outland Trophy winner. And Dave, I'm sure you remember covering him. My guess is he would have been a top 10 pick in 2000 if he had gone out after 2000, right? John Henderson.
Oh yeah. I don't have any doubt about it. D says on our message board, Cooper Mays has a family legacy of great players. So Cooper's got to be right up there as well. And yes, his dad played for Tennessee, would have been a first round pick if not for a flukish, weird, odd injury that happened after his pro day. Also getting some love, Fred White. Now, Fred White, that's a whole different level. Sorry, Eric Berry, but that's a different level. Fred and I are friends. So there's not a lot of people that I've covered over the years that I would call friends. That doesn't typically happen when you're covering a team. So Fred's a little bit different. He's on another level. I didn't mean to forget you there, Fred. And then people say, who can forget the Colquitts? An entire family of kickers all went to UT over multiple generations. So I think we're getting a little off topic here, but when you combine, they were excellent. Don't get me wrong, but Britain had some off-field issues. When you combine the player and the man, I got Eric Berry number one. I can't beat that. As far as guys I covered, again, which is roughly 98-ish, but full-time 110% in 2000. So I didn't get to know the 98, 99 guys as well till afterwards when Fred and I did radio together. So I think Eric Berry as a man is right up. And the fact that he loved Tennessee, Caleb, when Tennessee wasn't at its best, he could have gone to Georgia or Ohio State or anywhere he wanted to go.
I agree. And he was another guy raised in the Tennessee culture, his dad having played for Tennessee. In terms of talent and a person, you're probably right after the 98-99 year. I will say that in terms of just the person, there's still a Josh Dobbs and Juwan Jennings, who I love those guys. I'll also say, so I saw it on the message board and I want to point it out. I feel like the original of these guys was Johnny Majors, because Johnny Majors finished second in the Heisman, was a beloved player. And let's not forget this. Wins a national title at Pitt. And with a national title program at his doorstep, he decides to leave and come back home to Tennessee when the program was in dire straits at that point. And I mean, he threw away everything to try to rebuild Tennessee. Now, I brought this up when you were off last week, Dave. I don't know if you know, the NCAA is finally getting rid of their 25 per year scholarship limits. And it's only just going to be 85 at any time. The reason that's relevant is how Johnny Majors rebuilt Pitt, right? It was in 1973, that class. There were no scholarship limits at the time, and he had like 100-person class that included Tony Dorsett.
Yeah, one of them was Tony Dorsett. That's how it was pronounced before it turned into Dorsett. And I've interviewed him, and he's not really sure why it changed to Dorsett, but it did. It's it used to be Thiesman instead of Theismann because it rhymed with Heisman. Sometimes your name just changed. Maybe we'll call you Calhoun. I don't. Rick Terry Jewelry Design. Again, they want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry. Go to rickterry.com. Also, Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia updates. Facebook Sports Treasures TN. sportstreasurestn.com. But I got nothing but love for Eric Berry and what he has been able to do. And let me tell you why it's big, guys. Eric Berry wasn't coming around when guys like Butch Jones and Derek Dooley, to some extent, and Jeremy Pruitt were the head coach. These guys want to be around because they not only see that Tennessee's winning, but they see Tennessee's doing it in the right way with the right culture. And these guys are starting to come back. And I think it's important. I think it's important, particularly that Fred White, who we do a lot of work with, is very ingrained now with the current program, because a lot of guys come to him out of Georgia and say, what do you think about school X? And he can say all the great things about school X, but if he doesn't believe in the head coach, Caleb, he's probably going to be honest and tell a 16 or 17-year-old that. Now he believes in the head coach. And I think the same thing could be said for Eric Berry and some other stars that have come back recently.
Well, yeah, that's a huge deal. Something also helps, and something's helping Josh Heupel. And I'm going to point this out that's maybe uncomfortable for some people, but it deals with one Philip Fulmer. Let's be honest. Between Fulmer's firing and the time Fulmer was athletic director, there was a major split at the university with a lot of former loyalists feeling he was done wrong, who were not going to be loyal to Tennessee because of that. And whatever you think of Dooley, Butch Jones, and Jeremy Pruitt, they all had to deal with that. Or not Jeremy Pruitt, excuse me, Dooley and Butch Jones. The people who didn't like Fulmer felt a type of way when Fulmer was hired as athletic director, so they weren't necessarily fully on board with Jeremy Pruitt. Well, with Fulmer, I think Fulmer killed his own credibility so severely with his athletic director run that I think everybody's unified behind Josh Heupel, because even the biggest Fulmer loyalist can't defend him, the idea that he should be affiliated with the university right now.
Yep. Based off a column that I wrote on offthehooksports.com, is Tennessee's defense the story of the Vols season so far. So let me throw some numbers at you that I think that you'll find pretty impressive, that have somehow flown under the radar. Tennessee tied for number 2 in the country with 4.4 team sacks per game. The Vols are 4th in the nation with 9.4 tackles for a loss per game. Tennessee's football team isn't perfect. The Vols listed 21st in the country with 308 yards allowed per game, but we know some of that's going to be inflated, even if the Tennessee's offense isn't what it was last year. We're talking about Tennessee, perhaps, if they can prove it against better teams, being one of the better defenses in the nation. And you wrote the headline, is that the story of the Vols season? I think it is, the fact that you're addressing those needs. So while some might think of this as a transition year, especially with the quarterback position, Tennessee is showing growth, even if the record doesn't end up to be 10 regular season wins this year.
Yeah, and so, Dave, you know how I am. I hate totals numbers when you judge teams. I hate total defense. I hate total point. I mean, because that doesn't break, you don't know how many possessions there are in a game. It depends on so many things. I look at points per play, points per drive, yards per attempt, along with points per game. So just points per game on the surface. Last year, Tennessee gave up 22.8. This year, they're giving up 17.8. 5-point improvement. However, you and I would agree, teams are having fewer possessions against Tennessee now because Tennessee's not doing the quick scoring as much as they did last year. Well, Tennessee last year gave up 0.298 points per play, so just under 0.3. This year, that number is down to 0.254. That's a significant drop. That's on points per play. So their defense is highly efficient. They went from 5.3 yards per play allowed to 4.4 yards per play. Now, here's the most notable one, and no one's talking about this. They've gone from allowing over 7 yards per passing attempt to allowing under 6 yards per passing attempt, and they have the 13th ranked pass defense in the country right now in terms of yards allowed per pass attempt. Remember all last year when we talked about how bad their secondary was? Their secondary is dramatically improved, and no one wants to point this out. And I am fighting a lot of people in our community, Dave, who still hate on Kamal Hadden. When you were off last week, I did some digging. Kamal Hadden is top 10 in the nation in coverage grade right now of all defensive backs.
No, yeah, I saw that you wrote that, and I think that people are going to throw schedule at you, as Rocky Tom has already. Yes, but you ultimately have to remember where Tennessee was a year ago. I mean, they were like at one point they were in the 118s or the 110s in defense. I mean, this is
And they also just
vastly
faced the best
improved
quarterback
defense.
they're going to face.
Yeah. Yeah,
Spencer
no,
Rattler.
they did. Spencer Rattler. Yeah. I mean, aside from aside from an SEC championship game or a college football playoff or a bowl game, yeah, I mean, as far as who's actually on their schedule, I wouldn't argue with that. Let's not forget at this time last year, Tennessee did get a win over Pitt with a defensive effort, but that was never the mantra. That was never what was actually going to happen, other than maybe the Kentucky game. Those two games, which other game was Tennessee's defense the star? I don't have another one.
I don't really have Vanderbilt, but it's Vanderbilt. And so, yeah, I mean, and you're right. It's like, okay, this point last year also, so, you want to bring up Florida. Anthony Richardson threw for 400 yards on Tennessee last year. Who's better, Anthony Richardson or Spencer Rattler? It's Spencer Rattler.
Agreed. No, agreed.
Yeah. And what did Tennessee do to Spencer Rattler this year? Just Spencer Rattler alone. What did Spencer Rattler do to Tennessee last year, and what did he do to him this year?
No, fair. I think that Tennessee's defense is the story of the season, as long as Joe Milton continues to work out. The story, if he struggles at any point and he reverts to form, then the quarterback position is going to be the issue. But when you look back in the 2023 season, I think that you'll say, when you're putting together Josh Heupel's time at Tennessee, you'll look back and you will say that's when they learned to play defense, is 2023.
Yeah, I agree. And remember, I was bringing up for a lot of times last year the defense was underrated because a lot of those points that were given up, Alabama and South Carolina notwithstanding, a lot of the times Tennessee surrendered a lot of points. It was late in the game and they were letting teams come back that were just throwing it all over the field. But there's no denying that it's better this year. And you're right, 2023, this is going to be the year that, and this is a big thing for me, Dave, that I think separates Josh Heupel from Lincoln Riley. They run similar offenses, almost identical. But the big difference is Lincoln Riley's been a head coach now since 2017. So we're talking he's in his 7th year as a head coach and has never had a defense to this point, ever. And we're looking at Josh Heupel and we're seeing, okay, his 3rd year at Tennessee and he's got a defense that is being – it's not the same as USC. It's not. Tennessee's defense is much better.
No, and you mentioned Haddon too. Is it time, pardon me, for Tennessee secondary just to be looked at as different than it was last year? How many times were guys covering for other guys? Now that could speak to coaching and Willie Martinez, and we can go down that path at another time. But how many guys were covering for other guys because they were out of position? I think that was happening a lot more than you think. I think Tennessee has some more semblance of order. But ultimately what they have is they have a defensive front that's going to create pressure. So you don't have to cover guys for 4 and 5 seconds. You got to cover them for 2 and 3. The chains are more in your favor nowadays. First down is the most important down in football. Don't let anybody tell you that it's 3rd or 4th. First down sets up what you do. You pick up 4 yards. Statistically, on first down, your odds go through the roof of converting on a 1st and 10. So,
there's a reason. There's a reason. For instance, the Titans have done this for 5 years. They don't even put Derrick Henry on 3rd down. They rely on him to. The whole offense goes on what can Derrick Henry get me on 1st and 2nd down. And so, yeah, no, you're right. First down matters the most. And also, it helps that Tennessee, unlike USC, has a defensive coordinator who I think understands exactly how to play and complement this offense.
I think it should be exciting for Tennessee fans that you have a coach that does care about defense, because Travis says Lincoln Riley could give 2 flips about defense. I think that's true. That defense is horrible. That USC defense is bad. To be a national title contender, that's about as bad as one side of the ball can get. Maybe like Tennessee last year, who almost made the college football playoff and had a bad defense. Tennessee Cider Company, the original hard cider of the Smoky Mountains. Use the promo code HAT. That's HAT to receive some free swag with your cider order, available most anywhere in the U.S. It's tncidercompany.com, tncidercompany.com. Use the promo code HAT, and you can get that just incredible cider anywhere and get a free hat. How cool is that? For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Hit that like and subscribe button. Give us a grade on whatever audio platform you may be on. We would love for you to recommend us to friends and more. For Caleb, I'm Dave, Off the Hook Sports Weekday.